Pirelli Emilia-Romagna round. World SBK's 30th visit to the Misano World Circuit, Marco Simoncelli. It's a 64th Superbike race this afternoon, a 100th across the Superbike and Supersport classes. Only Assen and Phillip Island have hosted more. Constructed in the early 1970s, the circuit joined the World SBK calendar in 1991. Uniquely tight and compact, it's the second slowest circuit on our calendar, and the start-finish straight is only 510 metres long. Nonetheless, riders reach over 260 kilometres per hour before heavy braking into turn 1, the first of 3 key action hotspots. Perhaps the best place to make a pass is into turn 8, over 4.5 seconds on the brakes into La Quercia, the longest braking zone on the circuit. Top speeds are reached heading towards Curvone. From there, speeds gradually drop through decreasing radius corners into Caro, the slowest, taken at just 60 kilometres per hour. Toprak Razgatlioglu, the master, through here past Michael Ruben Rinaldi at turn 14 for victory in race 2 in 2021, then Alvaro Bautista in race 1 last year. And it is Razgatlioglu who set a new race lap record this morning, only a tenth of a second from yesterday's pole time from Alvaro Bautista. So far, the weekend's talking points have been off track or outside of the podium places. Toprak Razgatlioglu's BMW signing, Andrea Locatelli's contract extension and miserable start to the weekend, Danilo Petrucci's 3 incidents in 2 races, plus determining our grid positions. Well, it's all set us up for a climax. Race 2 of the Pirelli Emilia-Romagna round. Steve English alongside me. Let's start with Toprak. He's been desperate to try and take a victory this weekend. It's a circuit where he fancied his chances, but it's been one-way traffic in favour of Alvaro Bautista thus far.
He was third yesterday, second this morning. He's hoping that keeps trending in the right direction, but over 21 laps to try and beat Alvaro Bautista here is going to be really difficult. Toprak, he'll know he had his opportunity in the Superpole race. The late race red flag ended up probably robbing him of making an opportunity to make it into a battle with Bautista. But as it was, Toprak led twice, and Bautista came past him twice.
Yes, and Bautista with the more conservative tyre option in that Superpole race as well, so he might have fancied his chances in the final laps anyway. As it is, Bautista got it by a tenth of a second over Razgatlioglu. The championship advantage up at 81. It's just enjoy Superbikes race by race now and see if Razgatlioglu can get on terms here with Bautista.
Yeah, the hope is certainly that Toprak's going to be able to give himself a chance, but Alvaro so far this weekend has looked so good, so confident out there. He's made mistakes, though, it's worth noting. He had a crash in the Superpole session, but as it is, he keeps bouncing back, and for Alvaro with the yellow Ducati, it certainly has been a weekend to remember so far. He's out to try and make it another hat-trick.
Yes, even he said he looked up at the TV screens at one point and thought, who's that in the race? And realised that it was himself, Alvaro Bautista, wearing yellow this weekend with Ducati. A special round for them, of course, and a home race. Alvaro Bautista just studying the numbers, but I think he can do that quite calmly after the performance he's put in thus far.
Yeah, he's looking at his data, and his data will look nothing like Toprak's data, I think it's fair to say. You can see,
does anyone's look like Toprak's?
Well, that's one of the things whenever the Yamaha riders talk about what Toprak does well, and Garrett Gerloff actually mentioned it over the course of this weekend whenever he had been with Toprak at Yamaha. He said that one of the things that Toprak always complained about was actually the braking, how the bike stops into corners. He always wants a little bit more, and he needed to use every inch of his braking capability to make the move on Bautista into turn 4 earlier today, but then Alvaro was able to come back through before that red flag. But for Bautista, he'll know that this race is probably going to be a little bit easier than what he had in the Superpole race. It should stretch out a little bit more, but Toprak, if he makes a good start, he can get himself into the fight.
Yes, Bautista as much as half a second per lap faster than Razgatlioglu in race 1 yesterday afternoon. The track temperatures are back up at over 45 degrees, and that's where Ducatis start to come into their own.
Yeah, for Bautista, for Rinaldi, for Bassani, and a little bit further down the field, maybe for Danilo Petrucci. It's going to be tough for Petrucci from the 4th row of the grid, but for the Ducatis at the front of the field, they'll all know that as the temperature comes up, that's where their bike works well. But the temperature's a little bit cooler than what we've had so far this weekend. There's a bit more cloud cover here today, but it is still 46 degrees track temperature, so it is still coming up.
Yes, Danilo Petrucci is certainly going to need a better start than he's generally been putting in through 2023. The shake of the left hand there, he's obviously not going to be fully fit after taking a bit of a knock earlier on in the Tissot Superpole race, but he's leathered up and ready to go.
Yeah, you can see the incident at the start of the race. He's in about 7th position, attacks down the inside of Dominic Aguilar, and then makes contact with Aguilar, who then runs into the side of his teammate Remy Gardner. And Remy's okay after that one, but a long lap penalty for Petrucci for his part of that instant. And then as he made his way back onto the track, he joins up in the back of a big group of riders, Locatelli, the 2 Honda riders, and at turn 8 it was another mistake there from Petrucci, and it ends up taking Iker Lecuona out of the race. And for Petrucci, he's now been left with bruising on his hip and his thigh, and also his back. And for Iker Lecuona, he's left licking the wounds as well and out for this afternoon's race.
Yes, unfortunate for Iker Lecuona, suffering from damage to his left hip and ankle after that spill, and not surprising, it was a crash with quite some force.
Yeah, it's one of those instances when you're the rider that's hit from behind, it takes you by surprise, so your body doesn't get the chance to brace for it, and sometimes that then causes some more issues for you. And for Lecuona, it was such a heavy contact, he ended up getting trapped onto the bike as well, that it's ended up meaning that he's out of action for this afternoon. It's a shame for Iker.
But back up at the front, Toprak Razgatlioglu will be the closest rival, you can be sure of that, to Alvaro Bautista. The only other man really who you'd say has shown enough pace to even suggest that we might have a fight at the front is Michael Ruben Rinaldi. But Razgatlioglu, third in race 1 yesterday afternoon, said he just didn't have the pace of the Ducatis. He had to accept that, over 8 seconds down on Bautista at the checkered flag.
Yeah, I think for Toprak it's probably going to be a battle with Rinaldi for this race. If he's able to fight with Bautista, fair play to him, hats off, you've done a great job. But if he's able to get himself into a scrap, it's more than likely going to be with this Ducati.
And Toprak Razgatlioglu has talked already this season about trying to do as Jonathan Rea did in 2019. Damage limitation, make sure you finish second behind Alvaro Bautista. Hope for opportunities to present themselves as the season goes on. But Bautista has a round in hand already, and the fights are looking like they're further down the order. Robust move from Michael Ruben Rinaldi on Axel Bassani to come through and back into those podium positions. He will have certainly taken some joy from that.
Yeah, and so often we've seen them on track together, and we know that they've had their rivalry against one another, looking for that factory Ducati seat. Rinaldi was making sure to make a statement there. He's been able to do that so far this weekend with 2 podiums so far. The goal for him is 3 podiums this weekend in Misano, and you would have to say going into this afternoon's race, he certainly would be a favourite to be able to wrap up a pretty good weekend for him with 3 podium finishes, and just again the proof for Ducati that he's the man to back up Alvaro Bautista going forward.
Every chance of reversing the deficit in the championship standings for Michael Ruben Rinaldi. 11 points is the gap to Axel Bassani. Rinaldi's already moved through on Dominic Egerter this weekend from 7th to 6th in the championship. Bassani top independent P5, 110 points. Michael Ruben Rinaldi on 99. So 11 for Rinaldi to try and make up, to leave Misano with the advantage in 5th in the World Championship standings. And Jonathan Rea only 6 points ahead of Bassani himself, after Rea finished in 5th position in the Superpole race earlier on today. This is Dominic Egerter, second placed of the independent riders, but he was caught up in that Danilo Petrucci, Remy Gardner incident in the early stages, just coming through turn 2. So a big knock for him as well.
Yeah, it was good to see that Remy was okay after that crash, or relatively okay. You can see there, big impact for Remy, and then barrel rolling through the gravel trap as well. But for Domi, there was nowhere he could go for that instant. For GRT, they're left with 2 bikes that need to be repaired, 2 riders that then have to recover from the 4th row of the grid. And I think especially for Remy, it's quite tough, because this has been a much better weekend from compared to what we've seen so far this season. Yes,
unfortunate for Remy Gardner, who, as we said previously, in race 1 was able to come home for a top 10 finish in P9, and then crashing out earlier on today. A bit of a race of attrition in that sense. Mentioned Jonathan Rea previously, 4th in the championship standings. It's been a quiet start to the weekend really for Rea. 5th position, about where he is in the pecking order, I'm afraid.
Yeah, and for Jonathan, he was asked about this yesterday, about how it feels to be a 6-time world champion, just having to battle out for a top 5 finish. And certainly for Rea, he's just said, this is where we're at, this is where the Kawasaki is. And we saw it again in this morning's Superpole race, both Kawasaki riders finishing within a couple of seconds of each other, one after the other. So again, it does just show where Kawasaki stack up, and right now it's that 3rd manufacturer.
But the more this goes on, the more he will be thinking, what am I achieving here? Because it doesn't look as though he's getting closer to the front. He'll be getting more and more frustrated, riding around, scrapping for all he's worth just for a 5th position finish. You think about that fight against Dominic Egerter yesterday. Yeah,
if you've got the positives that you can find for this season for Jonathan Rea, who's had so much success, then you've been looking in places that are very difficult to find for everyone else in the paddock. We know how good Ray is, but it does look like it's just harder and harder for him and for Kawasaki to make the steps that they need to be able to challenge Bautista and Ducati, and even the Yamahas then as well. And you could see that again yesterday with Tommy Aguilar.
Caught a glimpse of Andrea Locatelli. He is third in the World Championship standings, but this has undoubtedly been his worst weekend in 2023 thus far. Just 7 points for Locatelli on the board, and made an improvement to get up onto the third row of the grid for race 2 this afternoon, but he's looked far from convincing.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that it's been tough for him so far this weekend, but a good step forward compared to what we had seen yesterday and up to this point in the weekend. He was into the top 6 in the warm-up session, ended up 7th in the Super Pole race. So certainly for Locatelli, it's trending in the right direction, but he needs to make sure that he's able to come away with a good finish now.
Yes, Locatelli's performance yesterday in race 1, down in 12th. His worst race finish without incident in Superbikes. So really unusual, mystifying lack of pace for Locatelli, particularly as at the start to this season he's looked the best he ever has. 4 brilliant rounds for him as well. The other big story of the weekend, Alex Lowes. He didn't qualify well because he had an incident in the early minutes of Superpole that cost him his first stint, and then he did get back out on track, set a lap time to go into 10th position. But then the red flags came out in Superpole, so he didn't get his opportunity to improve. He reckons he could have found at least half a second on his final flying lap. He then came through the field. He's had to do that twice. He got up into 6th position in the Superpole race earlier on today. Continuing his run, he's been on the front row of the grid for race 2 at every round this season so far.
Yeah.
Oh dear.
Loris
Baz with mechanical problems making his way round towards the grid. Big plumes of smoke coming out of the bike and a shake of the head for Loris Baz.
Yeah, and well, that's going to be it for Loris, but certainly for Baz and the Bonovo team, we've seen them lose a lot of track time over the course of this season, and for Loris, this is probably going to be the end of the day for him.
Yes, 2.5 minutes until pit lane closes. Well, less than that now, and Loris Baz making his way back in. We're going to see, well, the first signs of that. Just smoke billowing out of the side of the machine for Loris Baz.
Yeah, Loris is waving at the crowd there,
yes,
as opposed to telling anyone he's got an engine issue. He doesn't know because he's just cruising to get himself up to the grid.
And even now, there's still smoke coming out of the back of the machine, so a chaotic build-up to this race for Loris Baz, just trying to make his way back into the pit box. Axel Bassani now rolling through pit lane, the number 47 Ducati emerging out onto the circuit. His rivalry continuing with Michael Ruben Rinaldi. The pair clashed when Rinaldi went down in the first turn at the Indonesian round. The two had a coming together at the Catalonia round where they made contact twice on the same lap before Bassani made a rather ambitious attempt at a pass through turn 11 and collected Rinaldi, took him out of the race. One of the reasons that Rinaldi actually still sits behind Bassani in the championship standings, because it has been Rinaldi who's certainly had the upper hand over Bassani this weekend thus far.
You can see there at the top of the shot that there's another minute until pit lane closes. So once pit lane closes and all the bikes have got themselves to the grid, the marshals will then make sure that they're able to get that track cleaned and ready for the start of the race. We've still got 16 minutes until the start of the race, so hopefully there isn't too much fluid down there.
Yes, well, that's exactly what I was thinking, that hopefully once that area of the track is clear, any remedial work to the circuit can be carried out, because it looked like Baz continued on for a fair while to make sure that he could get back to the pits. So hopefully there is no fluid down, but if there is, there might be a fair trail of it, because Baz was out there for a while.
Yeah, and because he wasn't on the gas and pushing like normal, he wouldn't have really been noticing the engine. It's usually whenever you open the throttle that you suddenly sense that there isn't the power you would have expected, and that's when the rider locks down. But for Baz, he was making sure just to wave to the crowds and make sure that he was just able to get to the starting grid. So there was a couple of corners there where he was laying down a lot of fluid, you'd imagine, but it also depends on what that fluid is. It's not necessarily oil that's laid down whenever you see that kind of smoke.
Yes, the great and the good of the World SBK paddock certainly on the grid here in Misano. It has been a busy one in the paddock and a busy one on the grid as well. But we now get through to the front and we can see our pole sitter Alvaro Bautista. Pole with a lap record yesterday, 2 race victories out of 2. We may sense that he's faced his toughest test in that Superpole race, but Bautista's always keen to say it's not as easy as I make it look. Yeah,
it's never as easy as it looks, but for Alvaro Bautista, he'll know just as well as anyone else that it's about maintaining that momentum.
Second place on the grid for Toprak Razgatlioglu. He qualified directly behind Alvaro Bautista in that Super Pole session as well. He had set a new lap record in his first stint. He felt he could have gone faster late on in his second as well, but it was Bautista who took the edge after that red flag. Toprak relegated to third by Michael Ruben Rinaldi on the opening lap of race one. That was the only action in those podium positions, but it was much closer between the two of them at the front, Bautista and Razgatlioglu, in the Super Pole race earlier on today. Michael Ruben Rinaldi completes the front row of the grid, and just as he did after the Super Pole session, he is P3, so the top three finishing as they did at the end of the qualifying session in the Super Pole race earlier on today. So Michael Ruben Rinaldi hoping to make it 3 podiums out of 3.
Yeah, and for Rinaldi, that's what the goal has to be. It's trying to do things that we don't see from the likes of Axel Bassani, where you're able to consistently stay at the front, grind out those podium finishes. For Rinaldi, it's by trying to make sure you're able to hold on to that seat for next year. Ducati will make their decision in the next couple of months, and Rinaldi wants to make sure that he stays on that bike.
This man is certainly staying. Alvaro Bautista will continue on into 2024. There were some rumours because Bautista did manage to sow the seeds of doubt, but eventually he will continue on. Jonathan Rea with Kawasaki next season. Toprak Razgatlioglu will be the one of the big three to make a high-profile switch to BMW. Second row of the grid for Axel Bassani, Jonathan Rea and Alex Lowe's. Bassani and Rea each making up one position on the grid, and that's because of the incidents involving Danilo Petrucci earlier on in the Super Pole race. 2 fourth positions for Axel Bassani this weekend so far.
It's been a good weekend from Bassani. Once again, consistent, knows that the Ducati works well around here, and he's making the most of it.
Bassani 5th in the championship, only 6 points back from this man, Jonathan Rea, and he's made up 3 points on Rea this weekend so far. Rea with 2 5th position finishes. That's where he starts on the grid here. Again, qualified 6th, but makes up a position at Petrucci's expense.
Yeah, and for Jonathan, it's been a tough weekend all the way through, but to come away with top 6 finishes in the opening race of the year, of the weekend, and also in the Super Pole race, it's about what he's capable of around here, and that says a lot about Kawasaki.
One of the big movers in the top 9 positions on the grid, the front 3 rows of the grid for race 2 this afternoon, Alex Lowe's. He completes that row number 2. But it's time now to hear the national anthem of Italy. National anthem of Italy, and soaking up all of the atmosphere on the grid is our pit reporter Dave Goddard.
Yes, I'm down on the grid with Andrea Locatelli. Andrea, not the best of home rounds for you here in Italy so far, but a better grid position, great chance to improve here.
Yeah, honestly, it was difficult yesterday, but this morning we try a lot. We try to improve a lot. So now we start from P7. I think we can do a really good race, and we try to push. It's the last race here in Misano for today. So yeah, we try to push on the maximum, and we will see what we can get. But honestly, I would like to finish more in front. Yeah.
Good luck, Andrea. Thank you.
Well, before we get to Andrea Locatelli on the grid, this is Alex Lowe's who completes the second row. P6 for him. As I said, the next men in the order, all big movers. Lowe's up from 10th in Super Pole to 6th in the Super Pole race. Andrea Locatelli from 11th to 7th. Xavi Vierque from 16th to 8th. And Garrett Gerloff from 14th to 9th. So strong performances from all of those riders, and all of them therefore will expect that this could be their best race result of the weekend. They're that much closer to the front.
Yeah, definitely. In the opening race of the weekend, we did see that they got boxed up a little bit at the start, and it was difficult to bridge the gap to the riders in front of them. So the goal now is to be clean away at the start. If you're up inside those top 6, 7, 8 positions, you've now got a real chance in this race.
Yes, Alex Lowe's, considering that he's come from 4 positions further back down the order than teammate Jonathan Ray, has finished 7th compared to 5th in race 1 and 6th compared to 5th in the Superpole race. So Lowe's making progress against Ray. We'll see what the 2 KRT riders do here. Andrea Locatelli, heard from him on the grid there with Dave. Miserable start to this weekend. Worst performance we've ever seen from him really in Superbikes, with 12th position in race 1. Looked a little bit better for 7th, taking advantage of some of the attrition as well. So that's where he starts this afternoon. Xavi Vierque, super individual effort from him in the Superpole race. 16th on the grid, through to 8th position. Remember that the race was curtailed after just over 7 as well. So really great ride from Vierque, puts him into contention. And of course, he is the sole rider now carrying the banner of Honda after that crash for Iker Lecuona. Completing the 3rd row of the grid will be Garrett Gerloff, and he was another of those who capitalised on misfortune around him to come through from 14th after the Superpole session. Race 1 finished in 13th, did Garrett Gerloff, and 9th position for him in the Superpole race earlier on today. As I say, a little bit of good fortune in that, but Gerloff with a real springboard now for a good result this afternoon.
Yeah, and for Garrett, important to pick up the point, but most important to get that top 3 rows of the grid starting position. The red flag in yesterday's Superpole session, it really did seem to catch the BMW riders out in particular. They were all out of position from the Superpole session, but for Garrett, at least now he's got a chance. Starting inside the top 9 gives him an opportunity to at least come away with good points paying finishes. Top 12 has to be the target.
The rest of our grid positions are based on what riders were able to do in the Superpole session. The remainder are those who were unable to get into the top 9, and therefore the front 3 rows of the grid for race 2 this afternoon, based on the Tissot Superpole race earlier on today. Big weekend, and plenty of headlines for Danilo Petrucci right from the start, showing great pace. He did a good job to get into the top 3 in free practice on Friday. He qualified in P4 to show that that was no fluke. New swing arm on that Barney Ducati this weekend to bring him into contention, but he's had 2 retirements and hasn't made good use of it thus far.
Yeah, Barney's been able to bring a series of upgrades over the course of the season to try and help Petrucci. We've seen them bring the new swing arm for this weekend. That's obviously given him a big step forward. New tank and different units to be able to try and adjust himself on the bike to make him a little bit more comfortable out there and make the bike feel a little bit more like his.
Dominic Egerter back into action this weekend after arm pump surgery between rounds, and tested to the maximum extent after he went down in the Superpole race earlier on today. Was 6th position finish for him in race 1. Former Superbike world champion Sylvain Guintoli taking in the action here. But just going back to Dominic Egerter, he qualified in P7. Danilo Petrucci qualified in P4, hence they will start on the 4th row of the grid. And qualifying originally in P9, but now relegated to P12 after that incident involving Petrucci and Egerter. Well, they're all lining up 3 abreast, just as they were coming through turn 2 last time out in the Superpole race.
Yeah, it makes it easy for Remy to look across ruefully at the other 2, but at least Remy's able to make the start. It's been a tough start to the campaign for Remy. Think back to Indonesia whenever he was very sick, and then also this crash and a couple of other incidents. It hasn't been a lucky start to the season for him, but at least he's out there in this race.
Everyone looking up to the skies, because there were thunderstorms forecast for this afternoon, weren't there? That would have really spiced matters up, but it does look like we're pretty clear for the moment at least.
Yeah, and hopefully that's going to remain the case. It's actually pretty good conditions right now. It's very bright out. It's the only thing whenever you leave the commentary box, just to take in the conditions, but hopefully we're not going to have any rain through this one. It does look like it's going to stay dry all the way through to the end of the day.
Remy Gardner then completing that 4th row of the grid. A 9th position finish for him in race 1, that retirement earlier on. Fabio Di Gianantonio, so many of the MotoGP riders and former World SBK legends all turning up for this Misano visit.
Yeah, we saw Frankie Morbidelli on the grid as well, and it remains to be seen whether we'll see either of them on the grid for next season on the Superbike grid, but certainly for Digia, he's been one of the riders being linked with a move to here.
Well, I think we can now hear from Fabio Di Gianantonio on the grid.
We certainly can, yes, thanks Alex. Fabio Di Gianantonio, great weekend here in Italy. You must be loving it here at Misano.
Yeah, here is so special every time with a lot of people, a lot of passion and fans. So it's good to see my colleagues racing here.
You must be pleased that Ducati are so dominant this season as well.
Yeah, the Ducati seems super strong. Bautista is doing a great job. Also Rinaldi, also the private guys. So it's an honor for me to be a Ducati rider and see my colleagues going so fast.
And what are your plans for the future? Any possible plans in future years to join World Superbike?
Well, at the moment it's not my plan. My plan is to continue with MotoGP, but yeah, why not? One day in the future could be a possibility.
Thanks for your time, Fabio. Enjoy the weekend.
Thank you.
Keeping his options open.
Yeah, a lot of talk in the MotoGP paddock about Tony Arbolino potentially moving up to the Gresini bike. That would be Digia's seat, and that's why there was a bit of talk about whether or not it'd be a possibility for him to move to World SBK next year. Good rider, a lot of success in the junior classes, and certainly if there's an opportunity down the line to get him on a World Superbike grid, he'd be welcomed here.
Right, let's continue our run with the point-scoring potential contenders. Scott Redding, Philip Ertl and Bradley Ray on row number 5 for Redding. Qualified 12th originally. The remainder of the field, the men who capitalised on problems for Iker Lecuona, his withdrawal, bumping everyone up one. So Redding up from 13th to 12th. Ertl from 14th. Will line up alongside him, and Bradley Ray will complete that 5th row of the grid. And as I say, Baldassari, Sykes and Baz all bumped up one. So 17th for Baldassari in Superpole. He now lines up P16. Sykes and Baz alongside him. Shireen, Rabat and Vinales on row 7. Vitali and Mizuno due out of the back row of the grid. Iker Lecuona withdrawn, as is Gabriele Riu due to mechanical problems.